You're listening to the BBM Global Network with 25 years in broadcast audio and video production. Our passionate team creates content and marketing for the world of Internet Talk Radio. If you've got a passion, come join us at bbmglobalnetwork.com. The BBM Global Network. Your voice is now heard.
We all need self-expression. The most effective way to express ourselves is through words. But according to the Stuttering Foundation, close to 80 million people worldwide stutter today. This is Live Stutter-Free with your host, Anna Deeter. After years of practicing conventional speech therapy, Anna Deeter has pioneered a new and effective approach to this debilitating habit. So now, please welcome the host of Live Stutter-Free, Anna Deeter.
Happy Friday, everyone! Live Stutter-Free with your host, Anna Deeter, on BBM Global Network, and Tune In Radio is on. Today, we are going to continue our discussion of stuttering cure, business, and most importantly, the new profession called Etalon Speech Education, where the word etalon stands for the standard, norm, perfection. Nothing is better than etalon. So every Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern, I dedicate an hour from my pretty busy life to communication with you, my dear listeners. Who is listening to me right now, live? I wish I knew exactly, so I could answer all your individual questions, so I could see your eyes, I could hear your, I could see your smiles, and I could see your eyebrows rise. So are you yourself a person who stutters? Are you a parent of a child who struggles to learn an adequate speech behavior? Are you a school teacher, a speech therapist or pathologist? Or maybe you are some other conventionally trained specialist who is not satisfied with the results of your work with those who stutter. If you belong to the last category of my listeners, I know you all have a passionate desire to help people of any age, any race, speaking any language, and having any personality. You want to help them out of this debilitating condition that medical science has labeled with various fancy schmancy terms. They call it neurogenic or psychogenic disfluency. They call it stuttering, stammering, cluttering, stumbling, mumbling, bumbling, and many, many other words, even much less comprehensible for ordinary people. I'm referring to some of the terms that are in Latin language that ordinary people don't understand. But in reality, all these so-called scientific words have the same meaning. They all mean that people who are stuttering, they are stopping themselves because of restricting block stupor, because of a set restricting block stupor. Stupor blocks, that's the best way to put it. Yes, I have a great message for you. Stuttering is solved. The one in only 100% reliable and effective solution was determined, believe it or not, 20 years ago. But because an independent scientist who made this discovery in 1998 lived and still lives in Russia, and because he doesn't speak English language, not too many of you English-speaking people have ever heard his name. And still today, you remain unaware of his 3-day unblocking program called Etalon, which again I'm going to repeat. Etalon stands for perfection, for standard, for the norms. Believe it or not, natural speech norms exist on this planet. Like anything that we do in our life, there is only one precise way how to do it in the most energy efficient way, how to do it in the correct way. There are many, many ways could be to do it, but the correct way is only one. Unfortunately, to this day, if we open any conventional source of information, we can see pretty much the same statement. It says, the exact cause of stuttering is unknown. Both genetic and neurophysiology are thought to contribute. In simple words, they suspect that there is something wrong with stutterer's brain, it's wired incorrectly, there is something wrong with his breathing system, there is something wrong with his genetics, with his genes, and so on. But also this statement continues. There are many treatments and speech therapy techniques available that may, I want you to pay attention to the word may, that may help increase fluency in some, not in everyone, in some stutterers. But there is essentially no known cure for the disorder at present. I just read the citation from one of the online sources of information, of course, conventional sources of information. So what's going on today in the field of dealing with stuttering? Why is the situation with stuttering cure is so helpless? Why is it that after years of intensive researches and passionate desire of so many people to find the solution, we as a society still appear remaining at the ground zero with no definitive solution? Live Stutter-Free will answer this straightforward question today, right now. Stay tuned. You don't want to miss this Live Stutter-Free show. I am Anna Deeter, and I'm here to disclose some historical facts about the origin and about the development of the whole idea of the existence of this so-called sickness called stuttering, stammering, cluttering, and so on. Sickness that requires some kind of a cure, which, as you know, doesn't exist. That's what they say, and they say it correctly. It doesn't exist. So I have 30 years of experience working as a conventional speech therapist in 2 countries, Russia and the United States of America. And I also have worked in 2 languages, in 2 countries, in 2 languages, Russian and English, because I was born, raised, and obtained my master's degree in Russia. So when we come back after the commercial break, I will go directly to answering the question that I listed earlier. So talk to you in a bit.
You've been listening to Live Stutter-Free with your host, Anna Deeter. Listen each week and learn how to become unblocked, liberated, and live stutter-free with host Anna Deeter.
You are listening to Live Stutter-Free with your host Anna Deeter on BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. And we were talking about the origin and the development of the whole approach towards stuttering as a medical problem. To put it precisely, we just wanted to start talking about it, but we haven't started, because I decided to give a little background for those of you who are not familiar with my work and with my background. So I explained that I graduated from the University of Education with a master's degree as a speech language therapist and special education teacher. I earned my master's degree from the Russian university. So back in Russia, I was raised, educated, and also brainwashed, as I like to say, because we all are a little bit brainwashed, right? But the more I worked with stuttering during my 30-year-long speech language therapist career, the more discouraged and disappointed in the results of my therapeutic work with stutters I became. I always wondered if I could even expect a successful outcome without knowing precisely what I was dealing with, because they always said no one knows what stuttering is, no one knows what causes it, but you, a speech therapist, may help. Today, after I have witnessed the 100% effectiveness of my Etalon knowledge in my practical application over the past 6 years, because personally, just myself, without monitoring of my mentor, independent Russian scientist, academic Roman Alexeyevich Snishko, who monitors me from time to time and answers any questions I would have. So just without his assistance, I myself have liberated over 100 former stutterers in 3 days of this unblocking program called Etalon Speech Gymnastics. So today I know exactly what stuttering is, why people stutter, and what any stutterer must do to become unblocked in only 3 days and stop stuttering once and for all. Once and for all. This is why I have started asking myself the following questions. How could the concept of stuttering as a neurological disorder confuse so many brilliant, passionate scientists in the world? Why was stuttering announced and remained a mystery for such a long time? Who were the pioneers of such mistaken, delusional, and harmful approach, which still causes an estimated nearly 80 million people worldwide to struggle with stuttering today? And another question, why does stuttering cure approach call stuttering an incurable and mysterious disorder with unknown, elusive, and mystical reasons? To answer all these questions, I had to do my own research over several years. And then I published the discovered data in my books that you, dear listeners, may purchase from Amazon.com. Just Google my name and all the books will pop up immediately. Or you can purchase, if you live in the United States, you can purchase, it's going to be a small contribution in our non-profit organization called Speech Academy Etalon International by Roman Alexeyevich Snishko. And the titles of my books are Speech is a Skill, which can be purchased as a hard copy from both Amazon.com and from my website, our website, which is www.livestutterfree.com. The book is called Speech is a Skill. But if you live outside of the United States, the shipping is too expensive, and this is why I have come up with a way for you, dear listeners, to be able to read and just get my book right away. You can go to the website once again, www.livestutterfree.com, and you can download the PDF version of the same book, Speech is a Skill, which has a different title. It's called Live Stutter-Free. So the hard copy, Speech is a Skill, PDF version is Live Stutter-Free. For a small contribution of $50, you can get this book right away. If you have any technical problems, just simply email you the information, the contact information is there. And also, you don't have to buy any books if you just want to learn about the history of the stuttering cure business. A historical chapter, the historical chapter of my book, of my main book, Speech is a Skill or Live Stutter-Free, is also included in the ebook entitled Two Geniuses in Stuttering. If you download this book, which is free for you, the historical chapter is there, and you can read the facts and you can understand what I am talking about precisely. So you may download it from my website. And today I will present a few pieces of information that is accidentally or purposefully hidden from English language people. Why? You will learn about when we come back after the commercial break. Talk to you in a bit.
You've been listening to Live Stutter-Free with your host, Anna Deeter. Listen each week and learn how to become unblocked, liberated, and live stutter-free with host Anna Deeter.
Live Stutter-Free with your host Anna Deeter on BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio is back. Today I will present a few pieces of information that is accidentally or purposefully hidden from English language people, English speaking people. Why do I say by accident or purposefully? Because I don't know. I have an idea, I can speculate because I know the facts, but I want you, dear listeners, to decide yourself. Why? A lot of information that is written in Russian language is not available in English language. And for some reason this information is about the origin of the whole approach towards stuttering. So let's begin. I want you to understand that clumsy speakers and tongue-tied people speaking too fast and unclearly have existed since ancient times. They say that many famous people were known as inadequate speakers. They were some Egyptian pharaohs, the prophet Moses, the Roman poet Virgil, the philosopher and the orator Demosthenes, the Persian king Bat, For example, an ancient Greek historian, Herodotus, who lived in 484 to 425 BC, so really in ancient times. He wrote about King Bat that the king spoke quickly, indistinctly. He stumbled, and he didn't say the endings of the words. Thanks to the famous British drama film called The King's Speech, we learned about the struggles of the King of England, George IV, who had to rely on an Australian speech and language therapist, Lionel Logg. Logg. I love last names like this, Logg. If you know what this word means, just take a note. His last name was Logg. Lionel Logg. So George IV had to rely on his help to make his first wartime radio broadcast on Britain's declaration of war on Germany in 1939. So why do people, totally normal otherwise, behave in such a strange way while speaking? All these famous people, they were brilliant, they were genius, they were smart, but the moment they would begin speaking, they would begin acting in a really abnormal way. What is the cause and the mechanism of stuttering? Where is the damage? And how it could be corrected? How the damage could be fixed? There are so many stuttering cure specialists with their endless hypotheses about stuttering available today. People have invented so many different methods, strategies, techniques, devices. They even invented drugs for stuttering cure. But the question about the cause and the mechanism of stuttering is still remaining unanswered today. Just check with any conventional source of information, as I mentioned to you. So why is this so? For thousands of years, many people worked passionately but could not find definitive stuttering solution. Why? The answer is straightforward. The fundamental assumption of the whole human society, that the whole society believe in stuttering as some kind of a sickness of the body, including the sickness of the brain. The whole fundamental assumption in existence of the stuttering sickness has been wrong all the way. All these brilliant researchers and passionate scientists were tirelessly looking for a cure for something that is not a disease, that is not an illness, not a sickness, not a physiological abnormality of the body, including the brain. And therefore, it has never even required any cure or long-term treatment. People who stutter are healthy. There is nothing wrong with their body. There is nothing wrong with their brain. There is nothing wrong with the wiring of the brain. There is nothing wrong with their genes. People who stutter are simply using incorrectly their perfectly intact body, including their brain. Yes, if you stutter, it means that you simply use incorrectly your brain and other parts of your body, built 100% normally. But why? And how so many smart people could be so fundamentally wrong? How could they all not see such a simple reality? Here is another straightforward and quite shocking answer for you. It is because the majority of those researchers were and have been blocked and stuttered themselves. Yes, most of those who are involved in the stuttering, who were and are and have been involved in the stuttering cure research, those who practice dealing with in the research, stuttering research and stuttering practice, those have been people who stutter themselves. They themselves could not see and could not remove their own blocks. It is just logical to understand that why they couldn't see reality and explain the phenomenon of stuttering as a simple underdevelopment of adequate speaking skills as the result of a stupor block restriction. Without understanding of the stupor block as the real cause and the mechanism of stuttering, those confused people could only continue to assume that they themselves and others who stuttered were sick and needed a cure. And they kept searching for such cure diligently, passionately, but in vain. The blind were put in charge to lead the blind. So when we come back after the commercial break, I will give you more shocking information. Talk to you in a bit.
You've been listening to Live Stutter-Free with your host, Anna Deeter. Listen each week and learn how to become unblocked, liberated, and live stutter-free with host Anna Deeter.
Thank you so much for listening to Live Stutter-Free with your host Anna Deeter on BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. And today we are talking about the origin and the history of the development of the whole stuttering cure approach, the approach towards stuttering as some kind of a medical sickness, some kind of illness, some kind of abnormality, physical abnormality with the body and the brain. So, as I explained earlier, that in the beginning, the whole industry was based, and the whole study of a whole bunch of researches have been done by people who were blocked themselves. They stuttered themselves. So, and today it is still the case. The blind are put in charge to lead the blind, just like on the old painting of Peter Bruegel, if you're familiar with that. The blind is leading the blind. That's what we have today in the area of dealing with stuttering. Stutterers with SLP, speech language pathologist, therapist diplomas are assigned to lead other stutterers without degrees in speech and language therapy and pathology. Such mistaken, or maybe again I'm not pushing but just suggesting, criminal situation is still remaining worldwide today. But where and who started it? Dear listeners, if you want to learn more about how such delusional stuttering approach was invented and how it developed into a multi-billion-dollar profit medical business, feel free to do your own research. I have done my part. I have examined the data available in Russian and English languages, and I found a lot of facts pointing to a big international fraud that started, believe it or not, in Russia in 1889. According to the sources of information in Russian language, Russia was the very first country where the approach towards stuttering as some kind of a sickness requiring a cure became a well-organized, profit-making medical system. The whole delusional hypothesis about stuttering as a neurological disorder, some kind of an illness, was born at the end of the 19th century in Russia, in the city which is now in Ukraine, used to be Russia, now it's Ukraine, it's called Kiev. Well remembered there, but practically unknown in other countries today. Russian psychiatrist, not a speech expert, he had no clue what speech was. Professor Ivan Alexeyevich Sikorsky, the father of a famous aviator, Sikorsky, who invented the first helicopter, of course, for military purposes to kill people. You can find information about the sun in English language, about the military helicopter. But the father's name is not even put in the Wikipedia description with a blue link, so you cannot go further and search who his father was. It just said that he was a psychiatrist, that's it. But it doesn't say that he was the father of the stuttering cure approach. He officially voiced his hypothesis in 1889. He presented his unsubstantiated assumptions in the so-called scientific monograph about stuttering. This was later translated into German, discussed at international conferences, and all of a sudden served as a textbook in Germany, and was further adopted by the United States of America and other countries later in the 20th century. Based solely on his observation and analysis of stutterers' behavior, he didn't do any experiments. Sikorsky described the symptoms and characteristics of stuttering. So basically, he gathered stutterers, observed their behavior, summarized it, and said, this is a disease. Because people are behaving this way, this is a sickness. Here is what the symptoms are, and here is a cure for them. So he proposed some methods of cures of stuttering as a neurological disorder. He didn't do any experiments. He didn't prove it in any way practically. He just invested a lot of money. I don't know who, again, I can only speculate, knowing how strong was the Masonic organizations back then in Russia. So I can only say that after Sikorsky's hypothesis of a stuttering sickness was actively advertised in the scientific community, once again, what do you need to advertise? You need money. You need a lot of money. The more money you have, the more you can spread it all over the world, right? So after massive advertisement in the scientific community, this absurd and unproven assumption immediately began to evolve into a form of scientific postulate. It's this way and only this way. It began to rapidly accrete more and more new so-called scientific research of Sikorsky's followers, who blindly took his speculation for granted. After all, they all were, guess who? They all were stutterers themselves. To this day, many so-called scientists continue to rigidly follow this ignorant Sikorsky's assumption and presented in their scientific papers, so-called scientific papers, as scientifically proven and even as a postulate. When we come back, I will give you more amazing information about the personality of this so-called scientist who created an approach towards stuttering as a sickness. Talk to you in a bit.
You've been listening to Live Stutter-Free with your host, Anna Deeter. Listen each week and learn how to become unblocked, liberated, and live stutter-free with host Anna Deeter.
And we're back, Live Stutter-Free with your host Anna Deeter on BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. We are talking about the origin and the development, early development of the stuttering approach as some kind of a neurological disorder. So for some mysterious reason, which is not mysterious anymore, people started believing that stuttering is some kind of a sickness and it requires a cure, which, as we know now, has no cure, which is, I totally agree with. Of course, there is no cure, but why? Because there is no sickness to cure. So for some reason, the information that I'm presenting to you is only available to those who speak, who read and understand Russian language. This is why I've decided to present it here on Live Stutter-Free. If you would like to read more details, you feel free to go to the website www.livestutterfree.com and download any of my books that have this information. So today, 130 years later, we have indisputable scientific experimental data that refutes the Sikorsky hypothesis presented in his book about stuttering. It disputes it as a big lie. Basically, it's a big mistake, at least. We have many reasons to doubt the honesty of the father of stuttering. His name is Mr. Sikorsky, professor of psychiatry and a politician. We have many reasons to doubt his honesty as a scholar and authority of his scientific findings. Russian sources of information display various citations of famous, well-known scientists and writers of that time. Many of them characterize Sikorsky's personality and his public speeches with a great deal of negativity and even aversion. Here are just a few facts about this so-called scientist. Mr. Sikorsky was the largest Russian ideologist of nationalism. He actively preached racism and anti-Semitism, and he also objectified inequality of people as a basis for racial hierarchy. He was caught many times using false assumptions and referrals for his political purposes. I want to stop for a second to emphasize. He was the one who was just like Adolf Hitler, who insisted that there was a higher race of German people, right? So that's what Mr. Sikorsky insisted. He insisted that there was a higher race of Russians, higher race. There were superior people, super people, and the rest were just, nobody. That was the person who was the father of stuttering cure approach. After Sikorsky's testimonials as an expert witness from prosecution at one of the political trials, I mentioned to you he was also a politician, One well-known and respected, very respected, I respect him a lot, Russian writer, who also attended the court, wrote the following. Instead of a psychiatric assessment report, Professor Sikorsky started reading a collection of bigot stories from his notebook, the stories that had nothing to do with science. Another witness, the founder of forensic psychiatry in Russia, expressed his criticism of Sikorsky's dishonesty in the following way. He wrote, "Science, with its first and indispensable condition, honesty, was totally absent in the expertise of Professor Sikorsky." Another magazine called The Modern Psychiatry evaluated Sikorsky's expertise as shameful and not meeting the most basic scientific standards. And one more respected publication, the Journal of Neuropathology and Psychiatry, also argued the eminent Russian scientist compromised Russian science and covered his gray head with shame. By the special resolution, the Society of Psychiatrists determined Sikorsky's expertise as pseudoscientific, not relevant to the objective data, and not consistent with the rules of the statute of criminal proceedings. In the spring of 1913, the 12 All-Russia Pirogov Congress of Doctors adopted a special resolution against Sikorsky's expertise. In the fall of 1913, Sikorsky's expertise was condemned by the International Medical Congress in London and by the 86th Congress of German natural scientists and physicians in Vienna. The whole book of disapproving foreign responses to Sikorsky's expertise was published in Leipzig in 1913, and later it was published in Russian language as well. One Russian psychiatrist noted a massive rejection of Sikorsky's expertise by his colleagues. Psychiatrists have never been so unanimous and fundamental in the manifestation of their aversion to the use of psychiatry for political purposes. And after Sikorsky appealed to the politicians to stop the criticism, a number of medical societies in Russia were closed for their criticism of Sikorsky's expertise. The Moscow Journal of Neuropathology and Psychiatry wrote in this regard, talking about Sikorsky's expertise and criticizing it have become almost criminal. When we come back from the commercial break, I will just continue giving you a lot of shocking information. Talk to you in a bit.
You've been listening to Live Stutter-Free with your host, Anna Deeter. Listen each week and learn how to become unblocked, liberated, and live stutter-free with host Anna Deeter.
It is so great to spend this afternoon with you, dear listeners. Live Stutter-Free with your host, Anna Deeter, on BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio is here every Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And the telephone number is still quiet. I'm still waiting for you to call and to ask any questions about speech and stuttering. The number is, if you are in the United States of America, the number is 866-451-1451. Go ahead and call. So today I am sharing the information that is not available for those who can read only English language. I mean, you can read other languages, but not Russian language. If you don't know how to read and understand Russian, you will not have access to the information that I present during this show. And I have already explained that the father of the stuttering cure approach was in Russia, and this kind of the beginning, the origin of this stuttering cure approach was done in 1889, at the beginning of 19th century. Russia was the very first country where stuttering cure approach was born, and it was organized into a multi-billion-dollar profit business. And I was giving you facts about the personality of Mr. Sikorsky, Ivan Alexeyevich Sikorsky, the one who was funded by some mysterious, very rich organization, and he was able to quiet down everyone who was not happy about his hypothesis, about his bogus invention of this disease, sickness called stuttering. So I gave a lot of facts that prove that Mr. Sikorsky was certainly not an honest scientist. And those facts were a great demonstration of the ease with which he expressed, falsified, and used his unsubstantiated, not backed up by practical experiments, assumptions about different things for his personal benefit. One of the hypotheses was his assumption of stuttering as a neurological disorder. Without any practical testing, this hypothesis was accepted by the global scientific community, turned into a mass delusion, and even raised to the level of the law in many countries in the 20th century. No wonder. After all, anyone doubting this hypothesis was threatened by court and prosecution. So this is why people were just obedient, and they continued to obey to the conventional, to mainstream approach. So if you would like to read more about how this approach was born, with more details, and how it continued in other countries, feel free to download my free ebook, A Tale of Two Geniuses in Stuttering, or you can, for a smaller contribution, a non-profit organization, you can get the book Live Stutter-Free as a PDF, or Speech is a Skill. So when we come back next week, I will continue talking about how the whole stuttering cure approach became a mainstream approach in the United States of America. So stay tuned. Talk to you in a week.
You've been listening to Live Stutter-Free with your host, Anna Deeter. Listen each week and learn how to become unblocked, liberated, and live stutter-free with host Anna Deeter.
You've been listening to the BBM Global Network. The ideas, views, and opinions of this broadcast are those of the participants of the program and are not necessarily the ideas, views, and opinions of the BBM Global Network Company.